Hey there, I'm Elizabeth Green, and I'm 50 years old. I lived with my husband, John. Despite his polite demeanor and charm and an equally tidy suit, his actual personality was all about climbing the career ladder and measuring achievements by the width of his paycheck. Buried in a never-ending string of tasks to snatch promotions and pay raises, he had little time for a variety of things, but nothing at all for the relations with me. We met through a mutual acquaintance. He was handsome, with an intelligent look, and was attracted by his charm. However, the few moments we had in our past became date nights and snack dinners in the present, and the persistence of John's choice of his occupation rather than our marriage's survival began to annoy me and make more sense to me. Sign for myself, night in the office a routine, I was left alone at home, dinners at the table, barely took a couple of my hands, our conversations even shorter. Then, when I politely proposed spending more time together, my husband responded with a roar. But it turns out that I am already decent with my part-time job, full of myself. To say I was insulted was an understatement. The words cut me like a knife, and I was starting to shake. 25 years ago, I said, yes, with happy dreams in my eyes, but now, reflecting on the sink, I found only solitude and longing. I wept. I begged him to come back, but then he finally declared, locked himself away in the room, leaving me wordless for nearly a week. I felt the bitter taste of regret, but had not implored him to come back a single day sooner. John was a man with outdated views. He used to say that a woman should always be a crawl behind, to be silent, and do what he tells her to. I myself lost my parents early, and I had no idea of normal family relations, but since I was deeply in love, I simply nodded my head obediently to him. Before the wedding, he never showed me anything like that. It seemed to me that this John would return, and he did not return even in 25 years. Crushed by hopeless despair, I struggled every day, supporting that last bright flicker. And on some weary evening, I prepared to bathe, and John only returned, yawning from work. When I hugged him, I felt unaccustomed perfume from his shoes, like someone else's, which I had never seen before. Of course, I wanted to ask him about this, but he was quickly getting undressed and preparing for the bath, and I did not dare, so afraid of his possible anger and disgrace. Therefore, I silently held back, but the days went by and the smell did not disappear, clouding my feelings. And then, seemingly out of the blue, he said, John brought up a family dinner at his parents' place. I had to help. That was how their tradition worked. I did. I had a lot to do. He said it all so casually in his relaxed voice. Our daughter's coming back from college. It struck me then how much he adored her. Seems like she was just about the only person he genuinely cared about. So I helped out. John's mom was all old, but not too fragile. I did a lot. I was sweating already, and John laughed loudly once he got here, screamed that it's not about that. I had to help his mom properly. You know her back. He choked loudly, his mom making noises too. He was washed away into his old room. Something gave him relief from the noise. He always waited for his daughter to come back in the family dinner. Then my mother-in-law caught me off guard, asked, could you grab more alcohol? I blatantly said, yeah. So I went. Then he called. Boy, they were already so chirpy over the phone, he added the crowd outside. I knew he was on the spot. Don't give the guests dog food, he mocked lavishly. I realized the oven was still on. I threw all the dinner out. It was so cheerful. The commotion was so loud, some other relative shouted on John. But he wasn't finished. His mom scolded him and said the dinner looked for puppies. I replied, I am still on the street. He couldn't understand. He screamed the dinner looked fresh and homemade. Hanged up. I would remind him later. After this, I got to my in-laws' home, where my mother-in-law apologized to John for his behavior. As I was helping her, John entered the room and started yelling at me about the disgusting meal. His mother tried to scold him for this behavior, but John only suggested that she should teach me to be a proper wife. I was fed up with his arrogance, so I let out a sigh, and John turned to me, annoyed, and asked what was wrong. I figured that I might as well let the truth out right then and there. I gave a small smile and told him that I hadn't cooked a single thing. John's face went from confused to shocked as Emily, his daughter, came out from hiding. As soon as John's mom saw her, she spilled the beans that she also knew and wanted to try and teach John to have some humility. After that, John began to finally have some respect for me, and I couldn't help but think about how crazy this was. "Oh, I couldn't wait to see the look on John's face," she continued. It was hard to imagine becoming a deceitful daughter-in-law once more. She really did believe that John and I had been her sweet little power couple. It must have hurt her so much to learn the truth. I let it all out with my weary mother-in-law. John and I were not happy together. All he did was live to come home and sleep, and to make matters worse, he was having an affair. My mother-in-law looked horrified and yelled out, "Don't be talking nonsense." But I had proof. I grabbed the envelope and gave it to John. I could see his face turn ashen as he read all that on the reports. "What's this?" he muttered, stunned at what he read. I confronted him, calmly pointing out all the signs I suspected him of that finally checked out. John looked frustrated and defeated when he realized the truth. However, I realized I had not revealed all my cards. Not at all. I also mentioned how he had not contributed much to any family expenses lately and only found out he was spending that money on his mistresses. Nearby relatives who had heard what happened turned to John disgusted. They just rehear now how he had hurt such a good wife. They were now shaking their heads in disgust only. They condemned him. I knew my stance from that. "I'm divorcing you," I announced to him. "Go and remarry one of your mistresses." And of course I stood my ground that I wanted a fair amount of alimony. John looked visibly shaken. "Don't divorce me," he begged. John expected consequences from his actions, and they finally caught up to him. But it was already too late. Again, he splurged his salary on his mistresses, and I couldn't afford a way to pay for the divorce. I was merely shocked by John's selfish reasoning, like how the investigators' report found him lavishing on many private parties, expensive dinners in restaurants, other people's wives, and buying their children designer bags. John should definitely afford that if he had a job at that big company of his. His relative then told him, "You're the worst," and he directed a cold expression towards him. Emily did not give him any look at him, but John has finally realized the awkward situation surrounds him. But I decided to talk to John calmly. "Do you really think that your selfishness will justify you? And it appears that you depend on my income, while I am the only one working at home," I said unemotionally. Proudly, John replied, "My work is at a big company. It counts more in society." But I decided to burst his bubble. "I am a freelance engineer. Mine and your incomes are equal per annum, but I have to cover it all." John was completely horrified. "As I graduated from an online university, you got me a job at a big telecommunications company and became independent. I am actually accustomed to your lifestyle," I admitted. John realized the bad news. "What? Is Elizabeth actually earning as much as I do?" John exclaimed in shock. "Technically, I could have divorced him, but I didn't have to ruin Emily's future yet. Emily was unmarried, and I didn't want to complicate her marriage," I said open-heartedly. Emily burst into tears, saying that she didn't want a mom and a dad to get divorced. John begged her not to want, but Emily responded with a firm, "I want a mother to be happy and get divorced from you." As I looked at John, I felt a bit sorry. My mother-in-law and siblings have abandoned him. Nobody has comforted him, and I'm sure he's experienced the repercussions of his actions. After the divorce, John was in the same place, crying for a while. However, our separation was not as simple. At the law firm, John strongly opposed, signifying that they would sign it. They didn't want a divorce because it left him broke, but the evidence that John had committed adultery implies that my decision is final. Unfortunately, just as pale and nervous John was for the last time, he replied, "I'm sorry. I will agree your application for a divorce." John's mistresses also stopped calling him after the papers were signed. John ran out of money to give them what they wanted, and now they had nothing to do with it. Tried to sue for alimony from them, but they weren't looking for John anymore. He abandoned even Emily. Dad stopped calling when Emily was with me. John even carried a letter of apology sent through his lawyer, who had tears collected. Firmly refused to hear anything else. And time went by. By the end of the year, I had already moved out of the country house and settled in a cozy condominium. The alimony served as a down payment. The remaining conditions were perfect for me. Emily came to visit for the Christmas holidays. I asked her if she wanted to see my dad. Emily snorted with contempt. I did not plan to forgive Dad, Emily pointed out. Celebrating New Year's only with you, Mom, sounds much more fun. Life was tough with Dad, but Emily was worth it all. She's my little treasure. After the divorce, I wondered how it would turn out further with my life and work. My work will continue to grow. I had Emily alongside me. I did not plan on getting married. There is still a lot of time to continue, and soon I will. Saying with the advent of the new year, I promise to change this.